Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider, a priest of the Legionaries of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast on the StarQuest Production Network at sqpn.com. So today we finally reached day 100. Right? So we've gotten almost a third of the way through this. We're doing great. You're all doing great listening. And hopefully, as I'm going through, the podcast is improving things like audio quality and just how I explain things and such. Hopefully that's an improvement over the course of the year. As I noted, this is my first podcast, so I might not be perfect to start off. Sorry about some of the issues at the beginning. And today we are covering Orientalium Ecclesianum 12 through 14 on baptism and confirmation in the East. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican and frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday, we spoke about what is a patriarch in the Eastern churches and what authority they have. Today, we're going to talk about baptism and confirmation, including the distinction between East and West in this regard. This is part of the section, the discipline of the sacraments. We'll also cover this same section tomorrow. So paragraph 12 talks about reestablishing ancient practices. So let's read it. The Sacred Ecumenical Council confirms and approves the ancient discipline of the sacraments existing in the Oriental churches, as also the ritual practices connected with their celebration and administration, and ardently desires that this should be reestablished as circumstances warrant it. So this is a return to ancient practice. This has been a theme throughout the documents of Vatican II, especially in this document, is this idea of we want to return to what was the ancient practice. You don't want to just keep moving on and new things, right? So a big movement in Catholic theology in the few decades before Vatican II and even afterwards was what could sometimes be called ressourcement, which is that ressourcement, but with a French pronunciation, is a big movement to go back to the sources, go back to the fathers, go back to the ancient text, right? And so that was a big thing. And it was a movement away from the Latinizing, but also away from a kind of manualism, which was over scholasticizing everything and trying to work out it as a complete system rather than leaving a degree of mystery, right? Which is a lot of, if you go back to the ancients, it's a lot of things like that. So, paragraph 13 is talking about Eastern priests or ordinary ministers of confirmation. In the West, we as priests are extraordinary ministers of confirmation, but not ordinary ministers. But let's read paragraph 13. The established practice in respect to the minister of confirmation that has obtained from the most early times in the Eastern Church should be restored. Therefore, priests validly confer this sacrament using the chrism blessed by a patriarch or bishop. Right? As noted, this is different. The East and the West, the priest does in the East. What happened was in the early church, the bishop would generally do both baptism and confirmation. And that was fine. We had a small church with just one church in a city and things. But as you get all these towns all around the cities with churches in them, and you have, dozens of churches in the city, well, what are you going to do? So what happens is that there are two different solutions thought up in the church. In the West, our general practice was to wait on confirmation until a little later. Now, for most of us in the U.S. and Canada, we're probably 12, 14. What was more common in the day was bishops might not come out every year like they do today, but whenever they did their rounds, every 2-3 years, they would baptize confirm all the children in the parish above a certain age, above 5 or something like that, right? A long time confirmation was done much earlier, 5, 7, 8 years old. And it wasn't a set year because especially the parishes further out from the Dawson Sea, when you just have walking and maybe horses, the bishop might only get to the far parish in the diocese every 2-3 years. He might not be there every year, so he can only do the confirmation when he's actually there. And whereas in the East, as opposed to what our practice is, in the East, the general practice was the bishop delegated to all the priests to confirm, and they would confirm right after baptism. So in the Eastern tradition, I know in the Byzantine tradition, they also get the Eucharist. I'm not sure if that's common in the other Eastern traditions, but I know the Byzantine, so the European Eastern churches, they have the tradition of also giving them a very small piece of the Eucharist at baptism. They have baptism, confirmation, and Eucharist all within that same ceremony as a little baby. Now, their second Eucharist is around when we do it, usually first, second grade or something like that, but they have the first Eucharist at baptism. and along with confirmation. And to do that, you need to have all the priests in all the little towns delegated to perform that confirmation. That's a slightly different tradition, and it's just saying we're going to restore that for the East. Now, as with priests being able to confirm, it's talking about some of the more practical laws about this, rules about this in paragraph 14. Let's read it. All Eastern Rite priests, either in conjunction with baptism or separately from it, can confer the sacrament, confirmation, validly on the faithful in any rite, including the Latin. Licitly, however, only if the regulations of both the common and the particular law are observed. Priests also of the Latin rite, in accordance with the faculties they enjoy in respect to the administration of the sacrament, validly administer it to the faithful of Eastern churches without prejudice to the rite, observing in regard to licitness the regulations of both the common and the particular law. So, the Eastern Rite priests are always going to have this delegation, as I mentioned in the last one. And in the West, we can get delegation, or we have it in emergencies. For example, if I'm in the hospital and somebody's like, "Hey, I was never confirmed," I can do an emergency confirmation. I'm not sure if I have supposed to tell the bishop after that or not. I probably would, just because I'd call up the diocese to make sure. But I've never done that specific thing, but I know I could. Now, also there can be a one-time or specific delegation. This is often done for Easter Vigil, especially if the bishop doesn't want to have everybody in the diocese come down to the cathedral. And it's also done sometimes when the circumstances happen, right? So when I was in Ohio, we were in a small town. We usually travel around, and there was one small town we go to every few months, and we'd often do one night. We had the youth club, Conquest, and then the other night we'd be around, should be there for 2 days. And the other night, this time happened to be the night that the parish was having confirmation. But what happened was the bishop was going to come, and the main road was flooded out. And so the bishop was about to call up the priest and just give him delegation over the phone, because you already have the ceremony set up and everything. But then one of the other farmers showed him a side road that wasn't flooded over, and he was able to come out, right? So that's the idea. Those kind of things can happen. The Eastern Rites would still need that same kind of at least permission from the bishop to do it for a whole parish in the Western Rite. But, an individual case, it would be perfectly fine. And we Latin priests can administer it in the Eastern Rites, right? We have to follow their law too. So, you have to different things. I've learned a little bit of Eastern Rite, like Ukrainian Catholic liturgy. I don't feel confident enough to celebrate on my own yet, but if let's say down the road I've practiced it and I'm able to celebrate on my own, and one weekend one of the Ukrainian Catholic priests is sick and he's like, "Hey, can you substitute me?" And I have permission from the bishop to do that, from his eparch to do that, and then I just there's a baptism this week. Okay, I can just with confirmation I can just do that, right? And that would be no problem. That's all it's saying, right? So hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully that's clear. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast. You can donate to help StarQuest produce another great podcast at sqpn.com/give. You can give one time, monthly, or join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow, we will continue on the next paragraphs of Orientalium Ecclesiarum, 15 to 18, on the liturgy and marriage in the East. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. Go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X for more information on the podcast, such as playlists for individual documents and a reading plan. We have also set up an email for questions and comments, Vatican2@sqpn.com. That's Vatican, the number 2 at sqpn.com. And my own website, frmatthewlc.com, has a contact form you can use for the podcast.
Amen.